Hi everyone. To get us started this week, so that we're all on the same page with our Jupyter notebooks, I would like you to do this short assignment before class on Thursday. You can find all assignments on this new tab under Assignments. You can also find them up here under Assignments. We click on that. We'll see this assignment here, Intro to Jupyter Notebooks, due before class. This is the next class, of course. And there will be another assignment that's due next week that will also be an intro assignment, but a little bit more in depth. So to do this assignment, click on this link. And you simply need to copy this whole command here by highlighting it, right-click, and choosing copy. You then go to your Jupyter Lab and go down to terminal and paste the entire command. It's okay if you don't see all this stuff over here. If you just have the dollar symbol, that's perfectly fine. Press enter, and all of this should be written out, and a new file should pop up right here called Notebook Intro Assignment. You can edit this assignment from here, or you can create a new folder by clicking the new folder button here. Here, I'm going to call it Assignments. And then I'm going to drag that into that folder, just like I would on the desktop. Double click on that, and there is the assignment. So I'm going to exit out of the terminal, and then I'm going to double click on the assignment. And so here is the assignment in the form of a Jupyter notebook that has the extension .ipynb. I can get rid of this file pane by clicking on this folder icon here. If I want to bring it back, I just click it again. So what I want to do for this assignment is to read through this notebook and play around with using Jupyter Notebook. In Jupyter Notebook, there are two types of code that we're going to be working with. One is called Markdown, and the other one is, of course, called Python. And this code we work with in what are called code blocks. And as you can see at the top here, there is a rectangle box around getting started with Python notebooks. This is one code block. Look down here, introduction, that's another code block. Markdown block's another block, etc. Markdown is a really cool programming language. It is basically used to format websites and to format code in a really cool way. The way that you would format it in, let's say, Microsoft Word or Google Sheets. But it's slightly different. So if we take a look at this code block here, this is a rendered code block. It's really nice looking text, but if we double click, it is no longer rendered. Instead, it is raw code. And we can see that here's that text you saw, but then it started with this hashtag. What this is a denotation of heading. So we know that if we have different headings, we can have different size headings. This happens to be the first heading, or the largest heading, and that's one hashtag. If we press Control Enter, it renders the code. We can also, I double clicked again, we can also click on this play button, and that will render the code as well. We can also make the heading smaller. Let's say a heading of 2. Press play. Now that is a smaller heading. You can do 3, and that heading is even smaller. So we use code to render our text in the way that we want. Now, if we look at the introduction here, this is also a heading. This is heading of 2. Click on that. And then we also have regular text, which is just written like text, like you would in Microsoft Word or a program like that. There's no extra things that we add. And so if we don't add anything extra, it will just be rendered as text. We can also do some cool things like bold our text. If you take the text that you want bolded and you put 2 star symbols in the beginning and 2 star symbols at the end, it will render bold text. You can also render italic text by encasing it in single stars. If we run that, now that is italic. If you notice that there's no blank line between these 2 lines of text, therefore when it's rendered as 1 line. If I want it rendered as 2 lines, I simply make sure there's some white space in between, and now italic is on its own line. There's a lot more cool stuff you can do with Markdown, and so I provide you with a link here that will bring you to a tutorial, an interactive tutorial to work through Markdown if you want to learn any of the cool stuff that you can do with Markdown. Though, of course, simply being able to do headings and simply being able to write paragraphs is really all you need for this class. And Markdown code blocks, we need to make sure that the blocks are actually rendered in Markdown. So we go up here and we see there's a drop-down menu. We have choices of code, Markdown, and raw. Just make sure that Markdown is checked. The other type of code block is Python. And Python code blocks are the actual code that we're going to be running. These are any of the statistical tests that we do, any of the analysis that we do is going to be in Python. Python blocks are made up of 2 things, comments and code. Comments are actually started with a hashtag as well, though the meaning behind this is a little bit different. This hashtag, any line after that or any text after that will be ignored by the computer. It is not run as code. And so typically programmers will use this as a way to mark their code, to document their code so that somebody else using it can read it like a human. Everything is human language. This is called a comment, any line, yada, yada, yada. Of course, programming language is a little bit different, and eventually you'll be good enough to be able to read it without comments, but comments really help with understanding code, especially if it gets really complex. So I do have 2 lines of code here. You notice it is not, it started with a hashtag and it's actually colored. So Jupyter Hub is really cool. It will actually highlight your code to make it a little bit easier to read. And so here I have a comment, simple math. And so yeah, this is code that runs simple math. And basically it's a variable called x, and we can name it whatever we want. But x equals 1 plus 1. And what this basically does is it tells the computer, calculate 1 plus 1 and store it within the variable x. And so anytime that I want to know the answer of 1 plus 1, I can just call x. And so that's really great, but the computer will then just store it. And so we have to call it out. And so the next bit of code here is print the answer. We use what's called a function, and the function is print. And in a function, you put whatever you want the function to do in between parentheses. And so in here, we want the program to print this text, the answer is, and then comma x. Anything in quotes, this is something that we tell the computer to print. It doesn't do this on its own. You can make this text whatever you want. Here, the most logical thing is just the answer is, but it could be the result is, or an answer to our problem is, or the meaning of life is. It doesn't really matter. I'm going to put it back to the way it was. But what's important is that then we have this comma, and then after the comma, we have our variable. And so it's going to pull whatever answer that x is, whatever the answer of our simple math is. And to run that, same way as running the Markdown code, you either do Control-Enter, or you do this play button. You click this play button, and down here, it will pop out the answer. And here, of course, the answer is 2. So you're going to be working a lot in these Python code blocks. One thing about Python code blocks is sometimes there's errors and sometimes things won't work perfectly well. And so what you can do is either try to troubleshoot it, try to fix it so if you have an error, or when in doubt, and you want it, and let's say it's an assignment that you want to hand in and you're running out of time, simply comment out your code and write like, this was not working for me, with some sort of explanation. And that's a good way to make sure that you get stuff to me so that I can, I can fix it. And it's like, okay, well, you were really close, so you're going to get most of the points. But of course, this is pretty straightforward and, in fact, does work. There's no errors at all. A couple more things. If you want to create a new cell, you can add cells either above by clicking this button here on the right, or this button here. The way to get to these buttons is you just click on the code blocks. You see every code block has this. So let's make a cell below, and there it is. This will automatically be a code block, but if you want it to be Markdown, just change it to Markdown. You can also move code blocks around using these arrows. You can copy code blocks by clicking this button here to duplicate, and you can also delete code blocks by clicking on delete, or this trash can icon here. And then finally, you can save and download notebooks by, one, clicking the save button up here. I believe that these will automatically save as well every time you press the play button, but it's always good to save every so often. And then to download it, you right-click on the file itself. So of course, if you have the file pane hidden, you got to click that to unhide it. Right-click on it, and you click download. And then it will ask you where you want to download it. Here I'm going to download to download, save. So download, it downloaded. And then go back to Brightspace, and you can add your file. It has to be IPy NB, which it already is. My computer, upload, go to downloads. There we go. And we add and submit. And submission successful. And that's it. So for this assignment, I want you to do two things before class on Thursday. I want you to create a Markdown block below here that reads Hello World, and then below that, Python code block that prints Hello World. And make sure both of those blocks work, and then submit it on Brightspace before class on Thursday. I will see you all on Thursday.